This weekend only at the Downtown Convention Center, it's the return of the f***ing Awesome Con! Retail booths, guest speakers, cosplayers, and so much more. This weekend only at
f***ing Awesome Con!
Come on, Nephew Steve. The con's already open. Comics Dungeon may have been sucked into a reality-crushing vortex caused by the J.J. Abrams mystery box, but we still have thousands of back issues in storage we can sell. We gotta finish setting up these Jungle Queen comics before the crowds arrive.
I think they're already here, Uncle Manager Mike. Look at that line. Is that a new comic shop?
I'm unfamiliar with that shop.
They look really popular. Whoa! I've never seen so many women in a comic shop before.
Yeah. Do you know what a big deal it is to have this many women in the store at one time? They must be having a special event.
Come as your favorite problematic comic heroine and get 25% off? Whoa, who are you?
Oh, I cosplay as Sheena. To rewrite narratives I find too limiting through identity play and performance.
Cool. So are you like a graduate student or something?
Actually, I'm a college professor.
Problematic comic heroines. Right.
Hello, my name is Cole Hornaday.
And I'm Darian Lindle.
And welcome back to the Panel Jumper. Listen to some anthropologists and they will describe a time before the written word when societies looked primarily to the wisdom of women to guide their communities.
We're talking about the wise women, the witchy women, the wild women who were once called on to lead and teach through dance, magic, storytelling, and song. But in the patriarchal wilderness of the 21st century, wild women can be hard to see through the shifting undergrowth.
But as we'll soon discover, we just need to know where to look. Come with us as we do a little running through the jungle.
One intriguing and persistent wild woman archetype is the Jungle Queen.
To track the Jungle Queen in Western popular culture, we need to start with a work that inspired the modern archetype. H. Rider Haggard's novel She, A History of Adventure, is a classic Victorian colonial adventure to the dark continent of Africa, where two white men stumble into the fictional lost kingdom of Amahagar, where a native tribe is ruled over by a 2,000-year-old white woman named Aisha, or She Who Must Be Obeyed. She was published in 1887 and is still in print over 130 years later.
Among the phenomena that characterized the end of the 19th century, the feminist movement was one of the most destabilizing for Victorian society. Novelists had to grapple with new ideas and attitudes about gender and sex.
Related to Freud's studies in psychology.
And complicated by the belief in imperialism and the desire to colonize everything. In that landscape, what makes Haggard's heroine different from the other idealized female characters from earlier Victorian writers is just that she, Aisha, was more complicated. She was neither angel nor monster, but also kind of both.
Whatever she may have been thought to signify, its impact upon publication was tremendous. Everyone read it, especially men. A whole generation was influenced by it, and the generation after that.
The idea of the untamed woman thriving in the jungle took the late Victorian colonialist imagination by storm. Haggard's Jungle Queen sparked a trope that has remained in pop culture ever since.
The powerful woman versus menaced white beauty dichotomy is one with which the pulp and comics publishers wrestled.
Jungle Queen is a deep one to deconstruct. On the one hand, Africa had an exotic quality that these writers were fascinated by because it was unknown to them. Yet they couldn't wait to exploit it in print like they did with China, the Casbah, the sands of wherever, and so on. The natives are not individualized. There may be a loyal gun bearer, but the rest are depicted as superstitious savages. And what better symbol of white superiority than Jungle Queen, who was made at a time when black men were being lynched for even looking sideways at a white woman. And yet, here she is, swinging by overhead on a vine. in a leopard bikini.
Scantily clad jungle dwellers became a fixture in pulp fiction, comics, and B-movies. Darwa in the 1919 film A Scream in the Night. H. Bedford Jones's Jungle Girl in 1934. Fletcher Hanks' Phantomaw in Fiction House's Jungle Comics #2 in 1940. Rula, Jungle Goddess, the star of Zoot Comics throughout the 1940s. Jan of the Jungle, published by Marvel's predecessor Atlas in 1956. And leopard skin-clad Sheena, created by Will Eisner and Jerry Iger from 1937. We'll come back to Sheena later.
So the Jungle Queen started as a literal manifestation of male alarm over the learned and crusading new woman. But I wonder if these characters, these queens, flawed as they began, divisive as they are, and created merely as objects for readers and viewers to gawk at, I wonder if they could be perceived as something more, something like proto-feminist icons.
Uncle Manager Mike? Aren't those the failed sidekick villains who held us hostage with a bomb and subsequently went to jail?
It's the slammer for you two.
Have an unproblematic day.
Redox and Deadly Nightshade, what are you doing here?
Oh my. I was wondering when you'd notice we were here.
I thought the two of you were in jail.
Please. We didn't actually harm anyone. They released us for good behavior.
No harm? You almost killed us. You almost blew up Comics Dungeon. And now you're opening a competing comic book shop directly across the convention floor from us so we can't even sell our back issues? You have a weird definition of no harm.
We're not competing with you. We're trying to create a healthier retail environment. We're serving a clientele who need a different space and creating a customer that will bolster all comic shops.
What are you talking about?
Look, we felt terrible about what we did. We've been reading comics for years. And when we learned Octobriana was running your shop, well, it seemed like an exciting place for women who loved comics. But then you announced your sidekick auditions, and they were all about Batman. And we realized there was no place for the type of characters we wanted to be and see, and we made some bad decisions.
Like trying to kill us?
We were wrong. Okay, we were wrong. So, when we got out and we learned that you'd lost the Comics Dungeon, we decided, well, it was Redox's idea. We decided the best way to make up for our past crimes was to cross-upsell existing shops.
Cross-upsell?
Have you noticed an uptick in sales for your back issues this weekend?
Yeah. That's why I had to go get more Jungle Queen comics from storage this morning.
We only sell new books. That, along with clothing, jewelry, games, and merch that are directed solely at our underrepresented customers. So when we have customers who are interested in older comics, we send them to your stall because we know you have all of the back issues and the encyclopedic knowledge.
And because sometimes a rising tide really does float all the boats.
Who are you supposed to be?
I'm Rima, the Jungle Girl.
Who?
Rima is this enigmatic character from W.H. Hudson's 1904 novel, Green Mansions, a romance of the tropical forest. She's a girl orphaned in the Amazonian rainforest. She grows up in harmony with nature until this political refugee, Abel, arrives and falls in love with her. He becomes obsessed with taming Rima. As you might expect, Abel's obsession destroys the tranquility of Rima's jungle home and ultimately Rima herself. DC Comics published a comic book series about her in 1974 where they changed the story so she doesn't die in the end. She escapes and avenges animals and defends the forest, which was how she ended up in the cast of a Saturday morning cartoon, the all-new Super Friends Hour. Rima is this fascinating paradox. She's this woman in a dress made of spiderwebs who succeeds in surviving in a dangerous world full of predators. Still, she's also like the rainforest she lives in, existing in a continuum absent of agency, representing the patriarchal drive to fetishize and exploit the natural world.
So problematic. So are you a college professor?
No. I thumb my nose at the patriarchy on my YouTube channel.
Before we stroll too far down the jungle path, let's take a moment to acknowledge Edgar Rice Burroughs, creator of Tarzan, Lord of the Apes in 1912. Tarzan inspired, as my friend Cole might put it, a legion of loincloth legends who, for better or worse, cemented Tarzan as the white savior archetype, Jungle Edition. A model soon superimposed over many a jungle queen, including my personal favorite, Sheena, Queen of the Jungle.
Come the mid-1930s, the popularity of pulps was flagging thanks to the rise of comic books, and pulp publishers were desperate to make the transition while retaining their audience. Sometime around 1937, Will Eisner, the great elder statesman of sequential storytelling, established Eisner-Iger Studios with S.M. Jerry Iger. Their business model was to create comics on demand for numerous publishers and syndicates. Around this time, pulp publisher Fiction House was frantically looking to break into the comic book market and approached the duo about creating a jungle queen who spoke to the desires of their established audience. Fiction House got what they ordered in the shape of Sheena, Queen of the Jungle. History's muddy on exactly who created Sheena. Iger claims that Sheena was a product of his imagination alone and derived her name from an anti-Semitic slur.
What?
You heard me.
According to Eisner, Sheena was little more than a female knockoff of Tarzan and derived her name from someone we know well by now.
She, aka
She who must be obeyed.
In any event, Eisner-Iger unleashed one of the most influential of all jungle queens when Sheena made her debut appearance in Joshua B. Power's British magazine Wags No. 1 in 1937, followed by her first stateside appearance in Fiction House's Jumbo Comics No. 1 later that year. Sheena's origin is pretty prototypical. Once again, set in darkest Africa, Sheena is the white child of an ill-fated explorer slain by a local witch doctor who raises her as his own to become the queen of her domain. Sheena spends her days fighting evil white hunters, slave traders, and wild animals. Far from intellectually challenging storytelling, Sheena never aspired to be anything more than what she was: eye candy to feed the hungry male gaze. A role female comic characters are trapped into playing to this day.
In fact, as late as the 1960s, DC Comics implemented an in-house editorial policy code on how women should be represented in comics. They actually put this in writing.
The inclusion of females in stories is specifically discouraged.
That took.
Women, when used in plot structure, should be secondary in importance.
That took.
And should be drawn realistically without exaggeration of feminine physical qualities.
That did not take.
Boobs were a really big part, literally, of the female superhero package. Almost every superwoman came equipped with a superheroic rack. The usual way of the female superhero costume was to advertise the breasts of its wearer using décolletage, a cleavage cutout, a metal pair of Valkyrie cones, a bustier. Today's female costume characters tend to sport breasts so enormous that their ability simply to stand up and walk, let alone kick telekinetic ass, would seem to be their most marvelous and improbable talent.
In addition to reinforcing a culture of sexism, Sheena and others like her helped inscribe elements of racism, imperialism, and colonialism on American comics. That is a lot of isms. It can't be ignored that these jungle queens ruled over domains populated by harmful and insidious stereotypes of primarily brown and black people as some sort of divinely appointed, non-native white savior.
Of all the jungle queens, Sheena was probably the most successful crossover into other entertainment media. In 1955, Nasser Studios produced a 26-episode TV series starring model Iris McCalla in the titular role.
In 1984, Columbia Pictures turned Sheena into a movie vehicle for former Charlie's Angel Tanya Roberts.
The movie was far from a commercial success.
But it did take home a crate full of awards. Of course, they were Razzies, including Worst Screenplay, Worst Musical Score, Worst Actress, Worst Director, and Worst Picture.
And they painted a horse to look like a zebra, so there's that.
But here's the thing, and to be honest, it's the reason I keep wondering if there's not something more to the Jungle Queen archetype. I loved Sheena. And to 8-year-old Darian, Sheena wasn't problematic. She was awesome. She was a natural leader. She was passionate about conservation. She was super strong and defended the weak. She could talk to animals. She rode a frigging zebra. Sheena was a wild woman who wasn't bound by the rules of the patriarchal Midwestern American culture that I found so stifling at the time. I wanted to be Sheena. But that doesn't mean adult Darian doesn't know that Sheena as a character is completely problematic.
So you're telling me this cross-selling thing could work for all comic book shops in the city?
Think of it as a disloyalty rewards program. Visit 10 different comic book shops, get a comic free. Then, not only are we encouraging brick and mortar customers, we're also expanding the fan base.
And the more people who are included, the more resilient the fandom. The more faithful to customers.
Exactly.
Wait, so Aisha, the Golden High Priestess of the Sovereign Aliens from the second Guardians of the Galaxy movie, was based on she?
She who must be obeyed.
Archetypal possibilities grow and shrink over time. They reflect the stories we tell and who is telling them. Over the centuries, the spectrum of female archetypes has narrowed so that gender and its constructs have had fewer and fewer ways of expressing nonconformity. It's so easy for archetypes to become stereotypes when people stop telling their stories, when women and gender nonconforming people are made to feel that our biologies and our experiences are either uninteresting or shameful and should be hidden away.
The wild woman is the female soul. She is the one that thunders after injustice. The wild woman archetype, like many archetypes, shows up as a woman matures and is no longer content living under the dominant paradigm because she's moved on and become an individual. The wild is socialized out of the woman. If women aren't allowed to express their wildness, it can show up as compulsions and obsessions.
This conversation about jungle women is set before a conspicuous backdrop, a reckoning on sexual harassment and assault in which women's bodies are under attack both literally and rhetorically.
Just as some genius males have been unmasked as predators, their victims have been cast as their prey. The predation of women by those that misunderstand them is strikingly similar to the predation of the Jungle Queen.
The Jungle Queen exists in this thorny space where she's simultaneously a symbol of white colonialism and the object of sexual exploitation. Neither is a good look. It leads us to ask, is there a reason to keep revisiting the Jungle Queen?
Unfortunately, comics may never resist the pull to lean on stereotypes. However, more and more, we see a shift from stereotype to archetype, with female characters who celebrate physical and spiritual strength alongside intelligence and independence and model much-needed positive images.
The Jungle Queen archetype may have a troubling history, but that hasn't stopped people from going back to the archetypal well. Take Black Panther, for example, created by two white guys, Stan Lee and Jack Kirby in 1966. Of course, under the mask is T'Challa, a black man, not a white woman. They took the idea of the Jungle Queen and adapted it with some revisionism. And since, the mantle's been donned by Shuri, T'Challa's half-sister, who became Queen of the Wakandans, for God's sakes. So the contexts are a little different in the current socioeconomic climate.
So what's the verdict? Can a Jungle Queen be a feminist icon, or is she too problematic?
There are bound to be as many takes on that as there are people who care one way or another. For me, the essence of the Jungle Queen is the non-conforming wild woman, and she persists in our collective psyche for a reason. The fact that these stories continue to resonate hints at the possibilities of blending matriarchal and patriarchal archetypes into something altogether less binary. It definitely offers an incentive to reread and retell stories in search of a new understanding, even ones about problematic jungle queens. There's a self-conscious playfulness that inspires people to identify with jungle queens.
We're driven to reconstruct our heroines with outmoded archetypes and brand ourselves as wild women despite lacking Rima-level survival skills.
The persistence of the Jungle Queen archetype is practically a call to arms for creators, whether it's comics, prose, or movies. It's a call to challenge what it means to be wild, non-conforming, and destabilizing.
The Jungle Queen has the potential to be as disruptive today as she was when she was first introduced in the Victorian era.
H. Rider Haggard undoubtedly never foresaw the longevity of his Jungle Queen, nor how she would drive us to better survive and thrive in the jungle. Hail to the Queen, baby!
Thank you for watching.
We'll see you next time on The Panel Jumper.
This is Awesome Con Take 1 and action!
Awesome Con!